Hi everyone, so we are at the Florence Biennale. We are having a great time with artist Tilney Hardiment. These are her incredible works, and the series is Body Echo. And I'm gonna let Tilney to be the one introducing herself and talking to us about her work. How are you doing
I'm
today?
very well, thank you. And yes, my name is Tilney Hardiment, as you know, and these are some of the works that I've been working on over the last few years. The inspiration for them was the body, because I felt that it was a landscape, a subject matter that really no one can argue with. The thing that really motivates my work is working with different materials, and I find them fascinating, the way you can take something out of a tube or out of a jar, something dry, something wet, and then as soon as you put them on two dimensions, they have their own reality. And I guess the first time I experienced that was when I was about 10, and I went to the Tate in London, and I walked into the Rothko room and I saw his works, and I found it extraordinary that it was almost like a shrine that had been created for these paintings, so I knew they were important. And as I sat down and looked at them, I felt the surface of his work really spoke to me. I know that sounds very pretentious, but there was something about the minimal elements, but the maximum colour and the maximum focus on the marks, because that's basically, they really are very minimal, those works. So that kind of stuck with me, and it took me many, many years to get to a point where I felt that I could really explore the surface, and that's really what my work's all about.
Oh, wow. So you were only 10 years old back then.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
That's when you discovered you wanted to be an artist, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, although the first works I did were very much about kind of creating another reality. I lived in Chelsea, very near the King's Road, and at that time there were very colourful dresses, and my family were very flamboyant, very artistic, and my mother was a hippie, knew lots of fashion designers, and so I did a lot of drawing of women with sort of very 1930s clothes, and so for me it was a form of escapism. But I was 11 back then, and that was a very, very long time ago. Yeah.
Well, how would you define your style? How would you call it?
Well, it's a contradiction, because it's figurative, isn't it? Because it's on the body, but it's also very abstract, incredibly abstract. It's very, very elemental, and it's defined by the materials I use. So I don't set out to create a particular style in my work.
It's really soothing. Like I would say, I find that your works are a piece that you can meditate on. You can stare and discover so much more in there. Are you meditating while you're creating this? Is there a process during your creative process, or is that you, as a human being, transferring this calmness that you have to your works?
I think everybody goes into it was like a form of concentration. I watch my son when he's drawing, when he's editing, he does photography, and he often, does this with his mouth. It's kind of like a connection. So yes, it is a form of meditation, and you engage with the work. I might have an idea of what I would like the work to look like, but it's a relationship, and it leads you. The materials lead you, and it tells you what it needs, and the outcome really is a result of that relationship, of the hand on two dimensions.
You were talking about your creative process before, and I love what you were telling me, because you're saying you take the photos and then you draw and then you transfer and then again. Can you share that with the audience?
Yes. When I was at art college, one of the first interviews I had when I did my master's, my tutor said, "It's very interesting, Tilney, your work looks like it's painting." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I think your work really needs to reflect you." And that kind of made me think, not literally, oh, let's go and take photographs of my body blind, but I kind of arrived at the idea of wanting to work with a subject matter that no one could argue with, that was very, very simple, that was non-negotiable, that had landscape qualities. But like with anything, it's a process. So I used my body as a starting point, and it's like a kind of a vehicle to experiment with different materials. And often you'll see in my work there's an attempt to kind of recreate a skin-like texture. So I thought of graphite powder and watercolor paper, and I rubbed graphite powder into watercolor paper and got a skin-like texture. So it's not exactly emulating a physical thing. It's more a kind of translation of touch, of the feel of something.
And there is a lot of texture. So here, well, we're gonna be showing this close because really you can tell the pores, right? These are the pores of the skin.
Yes, yes.
How is the process during your daily routine? You get up, you paint, do you plan, or is it spontaneous?
Well, you know what? I'm always thinking about work. I remember somebody said to me the most important aspect of being alive is one of the most important things that people underestimate is looking. And as soon as I open my eyes, I'm working in a way because when you're trained to see, in perhaps in rather old-fashioned way, when you sit in front of a model and you draw from the model, you're trained to record what you see, and I don't think that's ever taken away from you. So yes, when I'm at the studio, I work on 3 or 4 different things at a time, but I'm kind of always at the studio, and I have a kind of visual sketchbook, and it's very pretentious, but I use my iPhone as a kind of sketchbook, take photographs a lot, and but yes, I work on 2 or 3 things at a time. There's a sculptural element to my work because each piece I do is made up of different materials. So some take a long time to dry. I might work with sand, I might work with wax, I might work with thick oil. So I always have 3 or 4 pieces on the go. And I would say that the only thing that's consistent every time I go to the studio is really dull. It's just the cleaning the palette and washing the brushes.
That sounds exciting, though.
Well, I feel very privileged to be able to do it. It's taken me many, many years to get to a place where I actually can do my own work, and I really know what a privilege that is.
Yes. Can we this is a little bit off the subject, but I think it's important to share because there's a lot of artists out there that I get a lot of emails from artists who struggle about I cannot do it yet. I still have to work. How was your process, and what would you share with them?
Well, when I left art college, I was 21, and my mother had sold our house in England, so I had no choice but to go to America. And well, I guess I could have stayed in England, but the way it unfolded was that I went to the States and I worked in the 80s in New York and in Boston. There was a very strong, there always has been a strong work ethic in America, but I was in a particular place where it was very driven. There was a lot of energy around me. I lived in Brooklyn and I worked in Manhattan, but even though I worked all day, I had a studio and I went there at night, and you've just got to keep doing, and yes, yeah. And of course, life throws things at you. I mean, I didn't work for many years when I tried making babies, and now I have a beautiful son, he's 16. But if you just always keep it going, in however you can do it, whether it's very small, even if it's, 10 minutes a day, even if it's writing something, yeah.
I know the exhibition here, the inspiration behind the exhibition is actually the environment. How do you see your work connecting to that message?
I think the environment has become so politicized, and I think that our world has become so populated with images, and almost, kids now, it's like they can almost wake up and choose a lifestyle, oh, who am I going to be today? And I think that my work perhaps is just a little call back to nature, a little call back to touch, a little call back to the basic elements of what give us, make us feel alive.
Well, it's great to hear everything from you. Is there anything else you would like to share with the audience?
Just thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Well, wait a minute. We're not going yet. I want to know what's coming up next for you. What are your plans this year or next year? Or what are you working? What can you share about the future?
Well, I'm working on a series of canvases, oil on canvas, and I've been approached by a few galleries in New York. So I'm going to explore that and hopefully have a show next spring in New York. So that's my next ambition.
Well, that's great. Congratulations. We would love to see you in New York City. So back to New York because you've lived in Brooklyn for a while. So, alrighty. Thank you so much, Tilney. And thanks everybody for watching. Bye.